Cutting it up to you.
And Idlewild.
You ready? I will kill a point.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order for the regular board meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District for Friday, May 2nd, 2025. Roll call, please.
Rotunda.
Here.
Epstein.
Here.
Schroeder. Here. Tucker.
Here.
Norberg here.
Excellent. Announcements. Eric.
Just like to welcome everybody to the regularly scheduled KMPUD board meeting. And if you are on Zoom and you'd like to speak, please use the raise your hand function.
Thank you. Agenda item 4 is corrections to the agenda or the consent calendar. Does anyone have any corrections?
Oh, nope.
Okay, great. Agenda item number 5, comments from the audience. As a reminder, this is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board on short non-agenda items that are within our jurisdiction. No discussion or action can be taken on items that are not on the agenda. I don't see anyone in the room. No, Eric, I'm not seeing anyone on
Not
Zoom.
seeing hands.
Okay, agenda item 6, written comments from the public. I'll note that there's nothing in the general comments, but there are some written comments when we get to some agenda items later. All right, item 7, adoption of the consent calendar. We have 3 items here: board meeting minutes from March 7th, 2025, current consent for claims, and receivables and shut-off reports.
Move to adopt the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. All right, agenda item 8, we do not have any items brought forward. So we'll move on to items for board action, section 9. We'll move on to 9A, the KVFE 218 engineering assessment study. I'll send that over to our staff and consultant.
Sure. So Ed, I'll let you drive if you want to share your screen.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me share my screen here. I think you have to authorize me to share, but let me know if
You should be able to share now. Try it again.
okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah. I can see it now.
Oh, you can see his screen?
It's not on there. So.
Oh, it says I'm sharing your screen
Just give me
share.
a second. If I stop mine, you should. Yep. Okay, there you are. We see it.
All right, go ahead. Thanks, Ed.
Okay, good afternoon, members of the board and Kirkwood residents. So today we're coming back to the board because the engineer's report for the proposed fire assessment has been prepared. It's been reviewed by your legal counsel, and so at this point we're bringing it before the board for approval or seeking direction on next steps as it relates to potential modifications to it or proceeding with the Prop 218 election, which involves sending notices and ballots to all the property owners within Kirkwood. So with that, I just would like to provide an overview of the methodology and the assessments that's incorporated in the engineer's report. And it's very similar to the presentation that was done back on March 7th. Since then, we've just analyzed the data a little more, the parcel data, and made some adjustments here and there based on more correct parcel data. But aside from that, the framework of the assessment methodology and the assessments is the same as what we reviewed and discussed back on March 7th. But just to give you a recap, what was discussed on March 7th is that fire assessments can't solely be assessed on a building on a rate per building square foot, as your current assessment is calculated today. And the reason for that is because of Prop 218. We have to assign assessments, allocate assessments based on benefit to property. And there is data out there that shows that a rate per building square foot does not get us there. And Also, we were asked to look at and compare to other fire districts, other fire assessments in the state. And it was confirmed that none of the fire assessments that we've seen in recent years have been set up to assess property based on a rate per building square foot. So we did not take that approach here for the Kirkwood assessment either. So the other thing that we discussed back on March 7th is the implementation of a 1,750 building square foot threshold to decipher which condos, large condos, are more similar in size and service population to single family homes, and which single family homes are on the smaller side that are potentially more in alignment with condos, in the sense that they're much smaller and hence have a smaller service population on average. And so we looked at the average building square feet per the Federal Reserve and also real estate data. And that average in the state of California was that 1,750 foot figure. And also we looked at the average within Kirkwood itself, meaning we took all the condos, all the residential property, all the single family homes within Kirkwood, and the average was 1,740. So everything pointed to this reference point. And for that reason, we've incorporated that distinction into the engineer's report. And what you'll notice in there in the assessment methodology section is that if you're a condo and your building square feet is greater than the 1,750 square feet, you are assessed equally to one single family home. Or if you are a single family home that has a building square feet of less than 1,750 square feet, you are assessed similar to the average condo, or the condo assessment, which generally speaking is about 75% that of the average single family home. The total assessment revenue for the district is a little over 1.2 million. So it's 1,234,000 is the revenue that we're projected to generate through the current assessment and assessment framework. So what does that mean in terms of assessment rates? There's two components, as you may remember, to the assessment. There's the land component that is assessed on a rate per lot square foot. And then there's the building component that involves the service population aspect of it. And that's where it varies if you're a single family home, a condo, or if you're commercial and office and your land use type. So when it comes to the land component, if you're a residential property, you're assessed at a rate of 0.00703 cents per lot square foot. And we'll go through a sample calculation here in a minute to show you what that means in aggregate dollars on average. And then on the building component side, the rate is $1,208.47 per EDU, one EDU being the equivalent of a standard single family home or a condo that has a square footage of greater than 1,750 square feet. The total assessment is the combination of the land component and the building component. So once we do the calculations individually, we take the sum, and that's the total assessment that property owners would see. And then we have what we're referring to as the additional benefit factor in the engineer's report. And this is applied to commercial properties, commercial and commercial office. And the additional benefit factor, what it represents is the additional demand that commercial properties place on fire services, the additional impact, if you will. We looked at energy usage data historically going back to 10 years or so, and it was determined that the additional demand or the additional impact is this 2.3 factor that you see here on the slide. And for that reason, you'll see the land component and the building component, the rates are higher than the rates you see above by that 2.3 factor. And then again, the total assessment for these commercial and commercial office parcels is calculated in the same way. It's the sum of the land component and the building component. These assessment rates are in fiscal year 25, $26. And commencing next July, so July 1st of 2026, we are proposing that the assessments will increase annually by the San Francisco Bay CPI as published by the Bureau of Labor and Statistics for the month of April, which is standard to what the district currently uses for all your other rates and charges. So it's very similar in that sense in terms of the escalation. So here's an example or a couple example calculations, one on the residential side and then the other on the commercial side. So let's start with the residential. And this is an example of an average single family home, which has about 18,000 lot square feet. So if you multiply it by the rate per lot square foot that we saw in the prior slide, that comes out to about $127. And then if we add on the rate per EDU, the 1,208, the total assessment for a standard single family home that has a lot square footage of about 18,000 square feet would be $1,335. And the total assessment revenue that we're generating from residential property represents about 60% of the overall assessment amount or 60% of the budget. And that amount is about $741,000. And so that's the revenue that would be generated from residential property in aggregate. And on the commercial side, that's where the additional benefit factor comes into play. So you're seeing the higher rate there for the land component and the building component. And so an example here for a commercial parcel that has about 20,000 lot square feet, the land component is $323. For on the building component side, for non-residential property, the assessment is calculated on a per 1,000 square feet equivalent to the standard single family home. And so that calculation there with the additional benefit factor for the building component is $3,725. When we take the combination of the two, this example for a commercial parcel is a little over $4,000, $4,048. The total assessment revenue that's anticipated to be generated for commercial property is a little under $500,000. It's this $493,000 number you see there, or about 40% of the total. So in aggregate between the two, that's how we get to that $1.234 million assessment revenue that we're anticipating to generate through this fire assessment. So with that, I'd be happy to address any questions the board may have or members of the community may have regarding the engineer's report or the assessment itself.
Thank you, Ed. If it's okay with the board, I'm thinking that we would use our process of having community comments, 3 minutes, and then have board discussion and questions. Is that okay? Okay. So in terms of community comments, I want to point everyone on the board to we had 2 emails in the section of the packet that were written. So I just make sure everyone has seen those and acknowledge those. But other than that, Eric, let's ask the community if anyone wants to have a comment on this agenda item. And again, up to 3 minutes. And I don't see anyone in the room here comments. So if there are any comments online?
There aren't any.
Nobody online.
Okay. Well, let's go to board discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to make sure that the residents are going to feel comfortable with the apportionment. And I know any tax we put together, or any rate plan we put together, is always going to be open to either corner cases that are oddballs or just disagreement over fairness. And so to try to reduce the barrier to getting the 218 passed, I think the square footage, I'd like to hear from you in detail because if I track the logic, square footage is charged for in increments of 1,000 square feet for commercial. And then there's two tranches for residential, one for dwellings over 1,750 square feet and dwellings under. And I think there's some sentiment or understanding, especially because we have a history here of pre-218 having an assessment solely placed on square footage, that people would expect it to be assigned more granularly for residences. So like the largest house we have in Kirkwood is about 8,000 square feet. So there's quite a bit of difference between a 750 square foot average house and 8,000. And I don't know the smallest dwelling, but I imagine there's some that are probably 900 square feet or something like that.
Smaller than that.
Smaller than that. Oh, yeah, actually condos are.
My Meadow studio, I think, was 300.
Right. So I think kind of when you look at those factors, people would expect to see some sort of charge per square foot or charge per 1,000 square feet. And you've addressed that by saying you looked at 10 other rate studies and they didn't base it on residential on square footage. And but it didn't say why. Like why you haven't seen any correlation between the square footage of a house or a dwelling and special benefit received? Is that really the core issue? Is there's no correlation there?
Yeah, that's great questions, board members. So, yeah, I mean that's generally it. So, there's no data out there that I'm aware of and that I've seen in other engineers' reports that supports X when it comes to residential property, that is, that supports X people per 1,000 building square feet. So, and because the average people per household in a 6,000 square foot home, as compared to, let's just say, a 7,000 square foot home, there's nothing that out there that I can point to that says, okay, with a 7,000 square foot home, there's, one extra person or two extra people, right? And so all the data that we have and engineering, assessment engineering, standard practice itself, it really just the people per household is really based on a standard single family home with the understanding that some are larger, some are smaller, things like that. So there's no good data that we could point to assign any sort of tiering system when it comes to residential property on increments of 1,000 or 500 or anything like that. On the non-residential side, we do have data there, and it is industry standard practice to say and to have X people, X service population per 1,000 of office, per 1,000 of industrial, per 1,000 of commercial. And what we've done on the non-residential side, it's always a proportion back to the comparison to a standard single family home. So even though on the non-residential, we are, like you're saying, assessing based on a rate per 1,000 square feet, let's just say, the correlation, the comparison is always back to the standard single family home, which is 3 people per household. And so for that reason, we've gone, we don't have an assessment per building square foot or a rate per building square foot. We don't have any sort of real estate data or any population data that we can point to. And as far as we can tell, there aren't any fire assessments that have been established that use that. So Kirkwood, it would be kind of the first of its kind in that regard. And I think the other thing we'd probably have to take a look at if we went that far is we'd probably have to look at occupancy rates as well, right? Because generally speaking, I think the water data that Kirkwood has points to this. Generally speaking, the larger homes are occupied less often throughout the year than the smaller homes. So if we, there's so many variables in all that. And so for all those reasons, we point to what we know, what's been, kind of tried and true, and we think is defensible. And what we did as an added layer is we did incorporate that 1750 distinction to account for the anomalies, right? But the reason we feel confident in that 17 figure is because it is an objective reference point, meaning there's all kinds of real estate data that point to that average. The Federal Reserve points to that average. Even within Kirkwood itself, when it comes to residential property, it lines up with that average. And so from our standpoint, from our perspective, it's an objective reference point that allows us to account for some of these anomalies, the very small single family homes versus the very large condominiums, if you will. So
And if
hopefully
I
that.
Kind of follow.
Yeah.
So the other side of this is then, could you explain kind of, I believe this is an engineering report that requires your license, right? Your license to produce these reports. And it'd be good for the residents, the voters to know, that, how is that constraining, or as far as you need to adhere to accepted practices like EDUs rather than square footage. It's not as if you can come in and create a very, very custom assessment. Can you kind of talk around that? Because I think, if you're new to this process and you might think, well, you could come in and use any sort of proxy for benefit received, but you're actually having to research and come up with really very provable and demonstratable reference points, right?
Right. Yeah.
Does that question makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very, very good question. And I think a lot of people wonder that with assessments, right? Because an assessment is different, very different than a special tax. A special tax being like the effort that was underway, I believe last year for a CFD for a special tax measure. Might get measure E or whatever it is. Where with a special tax, you have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you establish the tax rates, because it's not the benefit nexus requirement isn't there like it is with assessment. So you can do whatever you want really as far as tax rate structure for different land uses. You can do whatever parameters you want to use, as long as it's at the end of the day reasonable and you can get your constituents to vote on it. You have a lot of flexibility there, right? When it comes to assessments, assessments are governed under Proposition 218, and there's a few elements that are very essential when it comes to assessments. Is number one, you must a public agency throughout the state. So this isn't specific to Kirkwood or any region. This is statewide. A public agency must quantify and separate general benefit to the public at large and special benefit to property, right? And what I mean by special benefit to property is we're not reevaluating every year based on who the current property owner is, right? So if I own a home 1 year and I sell it to the next property owner, my assessment isn't going to change because property owner, B came in and purchased the property. The assessment stays with the property regardless of who the property owner is. So per Prop 218, we must quantify and separate general benefit to the public at large. So potentially any benefits that would can be attributed to the general population, flow through traffic, all that kind of thing. And so we've done that in the engineer's report. So you'll notice that we've determined the general benefit to be about 10% based on conversations and we've had with district staff and looking at the parameters that are specific to your community. So we've done that in the engineer's report. And then when it comes to the special benefit side, that's the part where we have to come up with a defensible methodology to spread the assessments to each property within the boundaries of your district and all the different land uses. And so that's where we look to standard practices that are defensible. There's certain districts that have been challenged over the years, and certain methodologies that are perhaps outdated. And at the end of the day, we have to be able to say that regardless of who the current property owner is, generally speaking, year in and year out, that the benefit to property, we can defend it, and the proportionality is there from commercial to residential, right? So for that reason, that's why we had to implement an intensity factor or additional benefit factor for your commercial properties, because that's an acknowledgement that the benefit received is not the same. So we did all that, and to your question about engineer and why that matters and why that's even a thing, is because what Prop 218 also says and requires is that to establish any new assessment or to increase any existing assessment, an engineer's report is required to be prepared. So that's why we've done so, and what's been filed with the board and under your review. An engineer's report is required to be prepared, and that engineer's report must be prepared by a registered engineer in the state of California. So a PE is the acronym for that. So and so that's why you'll see my engineering stamp on the engineer's report, and and at the end of the day, I've been hired to come up with a methodology that I feel, with my experience in the industry and current practices, puts the district in a solid position going forward, defensible position in compliance with Prop 218. But to your point, board member, complying with 218 may not necessarily align with what makes sense and what constituents perceive as the popular the popular methodology and the popular logic, if you will. So, but that's where we are today. So hopefully,
And so what would be at risk if you went with some non-standard proxy for determining special benefit received? We may be at risk at being able to defend our 218 apportionment, and you may be at risk as far as your PE license, right? I mean,
I think what in effect would happen is every assessment is always subject to a potential challenge from whether it be a property owner or whoever, really. It could be anybody. So if let's just say hypothetically, the board decides to move forward with the noticing and balloting of your property owners, they approve the district, and therefore we proceed with levying the assessments. Let's say a few years, 5 years down the line, a property owner moves into Kirkwood and looks at the engineer's report, the assessment, how the assessment is being assigned. They disagree with it. They file an appeal. They're not happy with the appeal process, and they go to the full extent of challenging it, meaning, essentially a case law, right? A lawsuit. It would go through court proceedings, and as the engineer that prepared this methodology and essentially prepared the report, I would be called on to defend it. And then it would all just play out and it would be adjudicated through the courts, and a decision would be made. And if the challenge is successful, what that would mean is the district would no longer be able to levy the assessment, and your revenue would go away. So for that reason, we always, our job when we walk in is we evaluate. We want to get you your revenue, right? We always have a revenue target, but concurrently with that is we want to make sure we're complying with Prop 218 and securing that revenue, because it does us no good to get this thing passed and get you that revenue if it's just going to get challenged and put the district in a liable position to have it overturned and have to go through the stress and the process to go through something like that. So so
I
that's
get, sorry to ask such long, or questions that require such long answers, but we need to be able to have this really clearly as a response to, residences or property owners that might have an issue. So it'll be helpful.
Yeah, thanks for the
Absolutely.
really good questions, John. Let's go to Chris and then Bob.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I know we touched on maybe all of this 2 months ago. Some of it's gone a bit cold. Could you just remind, please, or maybe it's for one of my colleagues on the board, why is it we're doing 218 as opposed to special tax? Are we compelled to do it that way? Is special tax not an option?
We did a special tax. It
In Measure E, right?
didn't pass, and that's what, 2 years?
2 years ago.
Oh, you have
So
a
you-
time, there's a time.
Till you could do another one.
I see, thank you.
Yeah.
Next question. There's a lot of use of the word benefit to property and as opposed to benefit to person or people. Obviously people own the property, but to John Schroeder's question before, I asked this question without advocating the position, but it's hard to understand why square footage is not a 218 qualifying metric when after all square footage measures property. And Ed, I heard your explanation to do with things like, are there people in the house as many days a year? Are there more people in a larger house than not? We do have a huge disparity between those 8,000 square foot, 7,000 square foot homes and those that are, a quarter or less in square footage. So if we're talking about benefit to property, isn't it a relevant criteria what the value of that physical, just the material property is?
So that's a good question. So pursuant to Prop 218, no assessment can solely be based on property values, right? So we can't whether it's $1 million home, $5 million home, that can't be the driving criteria, and that's
Sorry to stop you. So it can't solely be based on that.
right.
But
Right.
it sounds like that, and again, I'm getting deja vu. I know we've covered this,
Yeah.
but that can be a factor. And I asked though not about dollar value, but square footage, which I guess so many in the community are familiar with. And there are
Mhm.
sentiments like, why do we have to leave what we have? It works.
Sure.
So what about square footage again?
Yeah, so going back to the square footage thing, I think it sounds like what we're kind of saying here is that just because an 8,000 square foot home has more capacity, that automatically assumes that it has more people per household on average. And so what I was attempting to describe a little earlier is that there's no data that I can point to and that I know of that says on average how many people per household an 8,000 square foot home has versus a 3,000 per
I
square
got that.
foot.
I understand. I guess I'm just a bit caught up on the semantics that we emphasize benefit to property, but the logical, way to
Yeah,
assess property is in square feet and dollars, and we're constrained from leaning on those factors too much. So
Right.
Got it.
it is hard to represent this to some in the community who oppose the approach.
I mean,
Got it. And maybe one thing that could be added and maybe helpful is when we're looking at benefit to property as it relates to fire assessments, it's what properties pose the greatest fire risk, right? Fire risk in terms of demand on fire services. And so that's where the direct correlation to building square feet isn't quite there. When we're talking about which properties and to what degree, to what extent do they pose a greater or lesser fire risk and greater demand on fire services. And so, for example, in the case of commercial property, there's data there that we can use to determine impact and additional demand. But when we're talking about an 8,000 square foot home versus 6,000 versus 5,000, given the fact that there's no direct correlation that we can point to that says, okay, every 1,000 is X more people, then the question becomes, and then how from there do we quantify and say that 8,000 square foot home poses a greater fire risk and a greater demand on services?
Okay,
So,
I'll thank you for that. Just move to the next question. The 10% that is benefit to the public, who pays that?
Sure, that just must be paid from an alternative funding source that isn't the assessment revenue. So my understanding right now is that that's intended to be funded through your ad valorem, the 300,000 or so annual ad valorem revenue that you get.
Thank you. Last question. The largest, how do we treat Vale KMR from a square footage of land perspective? Obviously, when we service the chairlifts and that land is ginormous, but I assume how do we look at Vale as on a square footage basis?
Tax federal land.
Pardon?
It's federal, it's land on lease from the federal government. You can't tax federal.
So really, I mean, roughly speaking, we're really talking about land close to the village and the building infrastructure, not the chairlift
property
land.
held by Vale.
Pardon?
Only property owned by Vale.
Okay, thank
not
you.
leased.
Yeah, and I think and this question may have come up before, and I'd have to look at what exact parcels here that we're talking about here, but I believe the federal lands are adjacent to district boundaries, but not within, if I recall correctly. So
That's correct, Ed.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bob, did you have questions?
Thanks, Chris.
So Ed, my question is, we're considering really two different ideas that would have different costs that we would need to raise through the fund. So the assessment you've done, first it assigns, a percentage to every property of how much they pay, but how much we actually need to raise, we don't know yet. So if we accept this today and then we decide to raise a lesser amount, how does that fit in?
Sure,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So essentially what's in the engineer's report is we have the framework for general benefit, 10%, right? And then we have the framework for the assessment methodology and the proportionality of the assessments. So if you came back and said instead of 1.2 million, our target is now 600,000, what would happen is we would revise the cost estimate table or the cost estimate section in the engineer's report, and the assessments and the general benefit contribution would all go down proportionately. So it's reasonable, just to simplify it, it's reasonable to assume in that scenario the assessment rates would be cut in half, right? That's essentially what would be the result.
And would the motion that we would pass today be something like, as stated with caveats that we would adjust just numeric items, or how would that
Our
work?
only motion today is to accept the report. That's all your motion. You're accepting it. You're not going with the 218 process. You're not holding the public hearing. You're not doing any of the things. You're just accepting the report as written. There's no caveats needed.
Okay, noting that we know that we can amend the dollar value in it at a
There's no
later time.
caveats needed.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. There's no caveat needed to do that in the future.
No,
That's my point.
because you haven't gone
Right.
through the 218, the first hearing, the second hearing, the mailing. You haven't voted to do any of that. And I
Correct.
recommend you don't vote to do any of that at
Right.
this time.
Perfect. Thank you, Eric.
Is that about right, Ed?
That's right. Yeah, I think, and it's really at your discretion as far as like what the action today looks like. But simply put, we wouldn't notice and ballot property owners until the board has approved of the assessment rates that you would want to proceed with, and therefore the engineer's report, the version of the engineer's report and the cost estimate that you would want to proceed with. So, I agree with what Eric's saying. I think, generally speaking, what you're approving today is the framework and the content and substance of the engineer's report. And you can always come back and modify the cost estimate and whatever the revenue targets are accordingly.
No.
Um, I could have other, I think the other questions that have been asked have covered a lot of mine. I think the only thing that I would just, if you could tie together for me, because again, I'm not trying to come back to square footage again, but I do want to make sure that there's a column in your table on page 12 of, I think it is, of your report that has, talk about service population and how that converts to EDUs. I'm wondering if you can just tie together what Chris was asking on value and just service population. You talked about that. What are we proxying for the most? And so, just going back to like, just in a couple of sentences, there's been a lot of conversation. Just tie the whole thing together and summarize what we are, there's service population, there's an EDU, we have the square footage, just tie it all together on all of these pieces so that we have a coherent couple of sentences that we can all hear and be able to be knowledgeable on.
Sure. Okay, so let's and thank you. I think Eric, you brought this up, so thank you for putting it up on the screen here. But so the assessment is comprised of the two components, the land component and the improved or building component, or we're calling it. So the land component is very straightforward. It's just based on an assessment per lot square foot, right, or per parcel square foot. So this table here, the top one that you're looking at, the one with the land use classification, service population, and EDUs, this is in relation to the building component or the improved component alone, right? And the reason we have service population and EDUs is what we're doing here is we need to establish proportionality in the assessment. And what I mean by that is, and that's the purpose of equivalent dwelling units, right, is to establish proportionality. So what we're doing here with this table is we're assigning the average single family home or single family home with a building square footage of 1750 building square feet or more as one EDU. And one EDU means 3 people per household, right? So every other land use type down below is a ratio to that one EDU and a ratio to that 3 people per household. So you're seeing that the single family home that has less than the 1750 and the condos that have less than the 1750 building square feet, what we're saying there is that on average, they have about 75% of the service population. So they're being assigned an EDU of 0.75 because it's all, again, a ratio to the 3. And then similarly, on the non-residential side, we're doing the same thing. We're taking the service population per 1,000 and we're setting up the EDU in a way where it's a ratio to the 3. So when it comes to commercial property, it's 2 employees per 1,000. And so that's a ratio to the 3. So that's why you're seeing it as in terms of EDUs as 0.67 per 1,000 building square feet. And then for commercial office, the service population is 3 per 1,000. So that's why you're seeing it as 1 EDU per 1,000. And industrial on average has the least service population, and the industry standard there is 1 per 1,000. And so that's why you're seeing the 1/3 0.33 EDUs per 1,000. So that table there, what the purpose is to convey the proportionality in the assessment, utilizing service population, which ties back to fire risk, to get us to EDUs, which allows us to assess proportionately.
Thank you. Or any other questions or comments at this point?
I would make a motion to accept the report.
Second the motion.
Any other further discussion?
Oh, I thought it was moved. Excuse me.
Oh, no, there's usually the
Yeah.
opportunity for further discussion after a motion has been seconded. Any further discussion?
And let me just add, Ed, I think it's very well written and very thoughtful. So my compliments on the quality of the report.
I appreciate that. It was a collaborative effort for sure. Eric and your fire chief, they're very they know their stuff. So it was definitely a collaborative effort, and obviously your feedback from your legal counsel as well. So thank you.
All right. Any other comments for vote? Okay. All in favor of approving the engineering report? Notify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed. I will say what Bob just said. Thank you, Ed, for you and your team's work on this and your collaboration. I know we've had lots of comments and feedback from various parties, and I really appreciate the work and your receptiveness to our community's feedback and thoughts. I look forward to where we go next. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks,
Everybody
Ed.
have a great afternoon and a great weekend, okay?
You too, Ed.
All right.
Take care. Okay, bye.
Okay, we're going to now move on to agenda item 9B. This is where we'll have some presentation and information coming from our friends at Alpine County. We have some members here today who'll be able to speak for it. And I think I saw some people on Zoom as well. Klaus, as I see, is here with a hand up. And so I just want to start and preface this by saying, since we last met a couple of months ago, I have been reaching out to Terry quite a bit, and then she got me in touch with Nicole in our office, and John, you independently did this as well. And so really wanted to say thank you for Alpine County to take the calls and come forward with some numbers that we can start thinking through. I will caveat this, and I think my friends in Alpine will say the same thing. This is early stages, like nothing is set in stone on these numbers or approved by the Board of Supervisors in Alpine to say that this is what we would go forward with. But I just want to say this is encouraging for us to make an opportunity to have a conversation here, because we did not have these sorts of ability to have a conversation a month ago. And so I just want to say thank you to the team, and I've enjoyed the conversation so far, and we'll see where we can go from here. But it's exciting to have some other options potentially available to us. But I say potentially because nothing's set in stone. Did I miss the thing as a preface on that, Eric or Rick? And the staff, again, our staff has been working with you all for a long time on this as well. So we're on a journey together, and I appreciate that. So with that said, I want to give the floor to probably Klaus and Terry and Chief Marshall.
So just to let you know,
Sorry.
I just want to say CAO is going to try to join us.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. So CAO is Nicole, and
Yeah.
she will try to join.
Chief
She's at
Administrative.
another meeting and she was going to jump on as soon as she was off.
Perfect. Thank you.
This is Klaus. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, we can, Klaus. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to provide any additional answers to questions if there are any.
Klaus, your role, please.
I am the Director of Finance for Alpine County.
Thank you.
And so I think let's start with the level of service that would be coming with this, and just talking through what's expected here with the three options that you've given us in this setup is what would the level of service look like, and how would that compare to like volunteers that, you know, where are you envisioning with these options here? I think that would be a good starting point, and then we can talk about the numbers maybe in more detail, but the level of services with these options would be a good place to start potentially.
I can hit on that.
Great.
Paul Washington, Chief Eastern Alpine Fire.
Could you please stand over
Yeah,
there?
I can.
There's a microphone right here, so we just want to make sure
Yep.
everyone online can hear you. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, no worries. Like you said, I think there's three proposals out there. One's for a full-time paid department, basically with 3 shifts and 3 personnel, if I'm not mistaken. The other one was for chief officers only, or company officers only, and then the last one was for just volunteer system with a paid chief. So like you said, nothing's set in stone right now. It would be a caveat of whichever one came to fruition. Obviously, the volunteer one would be pretty much what you have now with Chief Ansel and your volunteer system, however that worked out. Basically, I don't know if anything would change other than actually paying a chief to be in that position. The one before this with the company officers, would there be?
I want to interrupt you for 1 second, because what I think we're not seeing on this screen is on Nicole was asking for that more direct, like you just said there, an option. I think Terry had another option that would just be a fully volunteered department, similar to what we have today in terms of fire personnel, and then having a fire chief such as yourself overseeing it. That's actually, I don't believe, one of the 3 options shown here. It's just something that we added as a follow-up conversation on. Go ahead, Klaus.
Can I make a clarification here, Chief Washam?
Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely. Klaus.
I believe the schedule that was submitted by Nicole for this packet was the first 3 options that we built We
Yes.
still, our draft of the all volunteer fire department that you and I talked about this week, Chief Washam, has yet to be submitted to this entity. So right now we have the original three. We have in the middle, if you recall, Chief Washam, the three captains. The one on the left is three battalion chiefs, and the one on the right is three captains and one battalion chief that we originally worked up, Chief Washam.
Could I ask or propose that we spend 5 minutes before hearing from you? And thank you so much for coming. Could someone either on board or Rick, Eric, perhaps we could hear in our context, in our apples to apples positions, battalion chief, captains, and so forth. If could one of you please describe this, because it is new to me in the packet. And then hear in more detail. I will get lost in the trees without having the forest view.
It's essentially the fundamental command structure that the fire departments across the country follow. You start with a probationary firefighter, a firefighter, firefighter EMT, firefighter paramedic. Then you have an engineer, captain, battalion chief, sometimes assistant chief, and chief. So it's just the command structure within the fire department. Obviously, the higher you go, the more it costs.
And today, Kirkwood's KVFD has volunteer fire chief you. We have several volunteers at different levels, and we have assets, plant equipment, trucks, and so forth.
Right.
What is the proposal to leverage all or most of that? How do you see it from your perspective before we hear it from Alpine?
This goes back to what the need is. We need staffing, we need personnel. So as you remember, we approached Amador Fire Protection District to provide a personnel, basically a draft of a personnel schedule that would possibly work for us, with the intent of having 2 people on 24/7. And they did so. And we also made the same request for Alpine County. And so we're developing that now, but Alpine County is now introduced a possibility of having maybe 1 personnel and a volunteer, which personally I do not recommend. I think to be an efficient fire department, to provide the best possible service, you should have 2 paid staff 24/7 and not rely on volunteers, which has been a challenge for us, as you know. But it's up to the board, it's up to the community on exactly what they would like our fire department to look like. And so today we're thankfully having Paul.
It was not my intent to
Yeah.
color, with point of view. So excuse me for that. But are these 3 columns basically base larger, even larger?
No. I would say, let me describe it this way. We have, before today and before this meeting, we had 2 options. There
Right.
was the full service option that Rick has recommended, and
Yeah.
appreciate that, and was able to work through and get a proposal for that from Amador. If that were not to be successful, the option would be to shut down.
Shut down.
So those were our 2 options. And so now we're very grateful for Eastern Alpine to come forward. And what they're doing is essentially saying, what I would generalize is these 3 columns is, let's think of it as 1 level of service that is below full. This would be like 1 full-time person over 24/7
Got
with
it.
multiple shifts. And then the other option, which I asked for because, and with all due respect to Rick and everything, I don't like asking for it, but given the conversations and the feedback that we've heard from other members of our community of what they will vote for, given their proportionate contribution to the assessment that we just approved, is lower of service than that. And the lowest level of service that we could provide that is not shutting down
Yeah.
is having chief basically oversee the same operations that we have today, which is all volunteers. And as Rick said, that is not his recommendation, and I agree and respect that.
And
However,
that's the scenario Klaus says
That-
has not been.
exactly, and that's what
prepared.
that, and that's the, so now if you think about making the spectrum, there are four opportunities potentially now. 2 that we know for sure,
Yeah.
Amador's and shutting down. And what we're exploring is a potential variation of these 3 as, a 1 full time. And then there's a potential for chief would take us over as a volunteer department fully with no other full-time 24/7 staff.
All right, then I'll just thank you for that indulgence. That's what I was hoping for. The 3 columns are largely, they're not that disparate in total dollar size, so I'll just
Yeah.
listen and learn. Thank you very much.
Copy. And that's, I mean, that in a nutshell wraps it up right there. And that's a pretty good overview right there.
The other factors, it's probably 280,000 a year for facilities and apparatus.
That's right. So any number that you're seeing on this spreadsheet or anything anywhere else is we need to add in our brains, just like we did for Amador, some extra dollars because our apparatus would still be used. We would be paying for all of that stuff.
Yep.
So
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, I don't know what else. I mean, that's pretty good in a nutshell where it sits. I'm in kind of agreement with Chief Ansel is the all volunteer system is probably, it's great. It works for us down there because we've got a lot of bodies. I know during the summer you're limited. And then of course we've got when Kirkwood becomes an island during the winter and we can't get here to assist with backup for Kirkwood, you're looking at a couple of people maybe, and that may not be what you are looking at for a fire suppression position.
that's right. So then maybe Chief, can I just ask you to go through what you see as the pros and cons of what you just said is more what you would recommend potentially is one of these three options. Can you talk us through maybe the pros and cons of why each of these three columns might be beneficial to Kirkwood or to
Absolutely.
Eastern Alpine?
And I'll start with the Amador proposal. That's obviously a full-time staff fire department. I don't remember what the numbers were people-wise, but it was a full-time, I think three on a shift. Proposal that would be somebody would be here 24/7 all year round. Our up here, our one we came up with battalion chief / company officer type positions. The battalion chief would be someone that would work under me, and be that chief officer up here. You'd still probably have a volunteer system underneath, but there'd be another chief officer up here that would report to me and could direct that. If I remember correctly, the captains and the chief officer and the battalions are fairly similar to that. If you had a chief officer up here and a company officer, basically a captain or a lieutenant, then you would have a chief officer that could kind of run the show up here, reporting back to me, and a company officer that could take care of the volunteer system and have that response go with him, and you'd have a chief officer there to respond to any of the incidents. So that's kind of where those three set up with. The last one with me being the only chief and then just having the volunteer system, I think that speaks for itself. You'll still have a volunteer system, and then whether I can get up here or not, whatever time of year it is, you'd be left with that. So is that kind of in a nutshell kind of give it to what you guys are looking at, or?
So this is one paid per shift? 24
So
hours a day?
this one would be, so you'd have to run 3 shifts to cover the whole 24/7. Depending on what position you went with, which column there you decided to go with. So you would have 3 shifts, A, B, and C, 24/7 coverage on those, but you would have one paid position on those, except for the last one where there's 2. And I don't remember how we broke that out, Cloud, to be for the battalion and captains. Did we break that out with the battalion was 24/7, 3 shifts with 3 captains, or did we just do one battalion chief for that?
Looks like one shift a day.
I believe one battalion chief. Does that make sense, Chief?
Yeah, I think that's where we went to. I think we did one battalion chief to oversee 3 captains. So you would have one chief officer that would oversee 3 captains that would work 24/7, some kind of a shift.
That's column 3.
So column 3 would be like an
Yeah.
8-hour shift of a battalion chief
Yep.
and then a 24/7 rotation of 3
Correct.
people. So you actually have 2 people on service 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
For when that battalion chief is on vacation.
Yeah, the days off.
Like whatever.
Yeah,
So
and then with the captain's thing, they would be on some kind of a shift routine,
okay.
24/7, 24/48 or 48/72. And they would work that, and the battalion chief obviously would be there 2 days a week. So
Understood. Great. That's really helpful clarification on that. So let me I want to talk about potential next steps as well. So but I want to make sure that we have any questions answered before I go to that part of this. Are there any other questions before I move
Yeah,
on?
for Eastern Alpine, you run as you're the paid chief, and then it's all volunteers. Is that correct?
yes,
Okay.
I am the paid chief. I've got 3 stations and I've got 32 volunteers right now.
Wow. Good for you.
But we've got the numbers down there to do that. So so
So
Yeah,
these
yeah.
would be the first additional paid
correct.
firefighters then.
Correct.
And the idea would this would become one of your new stations essentially.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, it technically already is. I mean, not that it's an Alpine County station, but it's Station 94 for Alpine County. That's how it's recognized by dispatch. So it would essentially just other than a name change of Alpine County Fire. Yeah.
Is Bear Valley one of the three?
Bear Valley is an Alpine County Fire Department, but it is a separate fire department from Eastern Alpine.
So it's not part of.
It's not part of
numbers.
Correct.
Any other questions?
Doug, the only thing I would mention, because this question has come up from the public and no one's raised it today. Why can't Amador do the same? Amador gave us the proposal that they felt satisfied their standard operating procedures and they wouldn't offer anything less than their standard operating procedures required. So that's why theirs is that way.
Correct.
Eastern Alpine has a different SOP that they believe that this would satisfy their liability and SOP issues.
Thank you for adding that, Eric. I appreciate it.
Chief, how do you and the county think about the pros and cons of hiring professional firefighters, perhaps for the first time under you?
I came from a department that we had paid fire departments. I came from the Forest Service for 30 some odd years. I had paid staff under me, of course, because we're all paid.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be new to me to have to manage firefighters and so forth. As far as the Alpine County side of it, it'll be a new challenge because we've never had that before other than the paid chief position. For me, it would be something I'll be looking into and trying to get step forward, and it'll be a lot of learning curves. And like you said, that this isn't set in stone, so there'll be a lot of trying to learn the job type of things. But I think it's doable. I think the volunteer side of things, like Chief Ansel recommended, I'm not sure that's quite the way you guys want to go. We can make it work if that's what you guys decide. There's some other options in between with some internship type things that we can work out if we had some paid staff up here. But when it comes down to it, you guys are looking for providing a product for your folks that live here. And right now you've got a good one with Chief Ansel and his crew. They've got a great crew up here. I think you're probably looking for something a little more than that. And that might be what you want to sit down and really talk about. Is what you guys need to see.
Right.
Are there pressures elsewhere in the county or demands to add paid staff, or is everything just fine in the rest of the fire district without going to paid?
In my fire district, everything's great. I mean, we're always looking at trying to go paid at some point with some folks. I mean, that's always a good step. Unfortunately, in this country, the volunteer system's dying out.
Yeah.
More and more, there's just not as much interest. There's not as much time. The folks that I have down there are stretching things thin with their personal lives and work and everything else. We make it work right now, but like I said, and as far as America's concerned, volunteer systems, there's just not a lot of interest to be volunteers anymore. So paid at some point down the road, probably something we're going to have to look at least with some kind of positions. Like I said, that's down the road though. Everything that works for my department right now works really good. We've got a really good system, and for right now, it works really solid.
Right.
So,
Klaus, I see your hand up. If there's anything else you wanted to add?
I just wanted to make one observation and just a comment. It's not a pro, it's not a con regarding the situation. It's just it's a reality that we do not have any paid firefighters currently. That if Eastern Alpine were to employ paid firefighters, we'd be creating a new bargaining unit. It's just for reference only. There would potentially be a union.
and that is a good point to bring up. I mean, I don't know a paid firehouse in the country right now that doesn't have some kind of a union back to it. So there would be that would have to more than likely come up at some point in that time.
It would likely change the numbers.
It could.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, one question. If we ceased operations, how would that impact your model? Because we're, responding to not only calls in the valley, but also Highway 88, and that would all fall on Alpine and Amador at that point, right?
Correct, it would, as far as I know, correct? Yes, so that would fall on us as well. How that would impact us? It's a long haul from Woodford to Kirkwood. If you're looking at being hurt up on the side of the highway, waiting for us to get there. We would do the best we can. Right now we're mutual aid with Kirkwood anyways. So it's not unheard of for us to have to come in and back Kirkwood up. It hasn't happened. That's not very often, but we do it. And we're standing by when they get called. So if we were to have to take that over, it would definitely impact us big time because
It's also a lot of people in houses too.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I've had somebody taken out of my house in an ambulance, unfortunately, so it happens.
And our response times would reflect that. I mean, that it would add response to what you guys need up here. So, I mean, it's on a good day without snow on the road, 25 minutes if we're sitting at the station, and more if they've got to respond from home. So it's an extra burden to the department.
Which is different
We're gonna talk about next step.
different than law
That's relevant
enforcement, where they're
questions.
patrolling in the area anyway.
Yeah, the sheriff's department's up and back over the past several times a day. So yeah, they're
Where you're staying at the firehouse until there's a call.
correct.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're out.
Your
yeah.
staff.
Yeah, for the most part, yes.
Any other questions on the proposals or anything like that? Because I would like to talk about next steps as well and get board guidance on that. That's okay. Any other questions before doing that? Okay, so a hand come up and go down. Eric Rickert. And let Eric talk. Eric?
Hi, hi, thanks. I was just wondering if the chief could answer, are the 32 volunteers, are they all in the process of being or are in compliant with the new requirements for training and so on? Basically being, as I understand it, at firefighter 1 level?
We are in process of always complying with the state regulation that always goes with new bodies and other folks that are floating in and out of the department. We are constantly doing firefighter 1 training, EMT training, specialty training. So we are trying to continue to meet state requirements on that. It is a challenge with a volunteer fire department to do that. As Chief Ansel could tell you, it's an ongoing process, and just about the time you start to think you're getting a lot of those bases covered, you get somebody new in the department and it starts all over again. So yes, we are continuing to function, trying to get to that point. Whether we get everybody up to that point all in one shot or not, that'll take some time. So
Is there a reason to think that this proposal would give Kirkwood Fire access to your larger pool of volunteers, or for that matter, physical equipment? In other words, we struggle to get volunteers, and maybe just being part of a larger system makes volunteers to support the paid staff in either model. But might that change for us?
I personally don't see that changing. I think the volunteers that you get up here are the volunteers that you get up here. And speaking from being involved with the Kirkwood Fire Department for 30 some odd years, being with Alpine and so forth, when I was a volunteer, the personnel here, it's always been a struggle trying to get volunteers because you just don't have the base, especially during the summer for folks that live here. And I'm sure you guys are witnessing that now. During the summer, the numbers grow a little bit, or I'm sorry, during the winter, the numbers grow because you get people living in housing and so forth. So would folks from in the Woodford's Marthaville area be more available to come up here? I don't think that's going to change at all. You're gonna still suffer from the volunteerism part of it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Would you agree, Rick, with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
You bet.
All right, so
Thank you
now,
for having me.
no, I appreciate y'all being here and coming in person especially. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So in terms of next steps, what I would like to propose is that myself and then John, who independently had reached out to Terry and his team and has expressed interest in me to continue the conversation with our friends in Alpine County to do so, with the perspective that we would explore, and again, board guidance on, I would say there are 4 columns, that one that's not here yet, but that would be the fully volunteer, no paid staff option. And one of these 4, board can give us guidance on all of those 4, one of those 4, some subs of those 4, but that we in the next few months, because we do need to move quickly. And, we can't have this go a year, but I'm hopeful that with the momentum we have, we can. But for the board to give guidance for us to go forward and have weekly conversations, hopefully with Cole and team and Chief and Terry and Klaus to get something firmed up, so that hopefully sometime in the next few months we would be able to come with firmed numbers similar to what we have for Amador, come from something with our friends in Alpine County to then be able to have a decision on which of these options we would want to go forward with, to then update the engineering report that we just approved. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yes. So is there board guidance on of the 4 options that we should focus on or not? All 4 of them for now in the early stages? Is everyone okay with
I'd like to think that after 20, 30 years, we've had some learning. So replicating the current model with a different person, I think we'll end up with the same results. So I don't see any reason to lose time and energy on that. I mean, it's clear to me that there needs to be at least, well, like what Chief Withrow went through, he said, there's two issues. One is nearness to the event, response time, and the second is insufficient force to deal with the problem.
Right.
So I think we're looking at a proposal where, you know, in any of these options, there's at least somebody always present. Whether we have the full force, to me, depends on what month it is. But that's going to be better than shutting down. But I don't know if it's good enough to do it, but I'm willing to try to find out.
Let me ask you a question of if people, so I don't disagree with anything, but I'm trying to think about the other option, which is what we've learned and how the engineering assessment and engineering report allocates voting. And given that as an option, should we consider both as potential options in case there is sentiment that one of the three that are on the screen now is not viable, in which case our only other option would be to shut down? Is having something that is more similar to what we have today as a potential option valuable to have a conversation on? Is that better than shutting down?
No. I don't think so. That's one opinion.
Again, is the one not on the screen, which is all volunteer under new,
Yeah.
is better than shutting down? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. It's like, that would be a couple hundred. That's the same as
it's a waste of time, but
what's that?
I concur with Bob.
Peter? Don?
That's somebody 2 a.m. driving in from home to deal with a broken alarm.
Mhm.
I have no interest in saying that's the low end of our solution. It's too low.
Peter, John, thoughts?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, volunteer situations, I could get better. I guess, and then is the concern about having paid and a volunteer, that the volunteer be qualified, that it would, or the volunteer be available at all? Or
Yes.
a mix of the both?
Yes.
Yes, both.
Let's do all about.
Yeah, so you'd have somebody who's not capable or no one at all. That'd be the concern.
Okay. So what I'm hearing, sorry, I didn't interrupt. I meant to give you a chance to speak too. Thoughts?
I sure don't want us to shut down.
What's the minimum level of service you'd be willing to offer to our community to vote on?
I think an all volunteers is better than shutting down.
Okay.
I know that it may not sound logical, but I'm not ready to give up.
We respect that.
Okay. Rick?
So I just want to remind the board that we're in dire straits now. We are still having shifts that aren't covered. And, I appreciate, a few months, but that could be another year. So I would really like to see, if we're going to move forward with discussions with Alpine County and the process, that there is a definitive timeline on when we're going to complete this, because the time it takes to develop an MOU or some type of an agreement, they still have to go through their board of supervisors, like Amador would have to go through theirs. It's going to take a little bit of time, and then there's hiring and staffing. And so again,
Yes.
the need is now.
Yeah, agree completely. I tried to allude to that earlier, but I will say it again. I mean, let me ask our friends here. Do you think that we could work together in the matter of months to come to more concrete numbers? Klaus, I see, if you're still in here too. I mean, who is that something that you think is reasonable?
Klaus is a number guy.
Klaus, why don't you-
Plus, I haven't removed your permission. You don't have to raise your hand. You're just consistently unmuted right now. You're good to go.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
I would say that Supervisor Woodrow, she could also chime in if she wishes. I believe the board would be very responsive to us moving as quick as possible, because they definitely want to do what's right for Kirkwood.
Excellent. Okay, so then if I'm
Yeah, just one thing, and Nicole, who hopefully will be on shortly, alluded to in our conversation. I mean, there's a few cleanup items in these numbers, a few question items, some, utilities and what are miscellaneous professional services at 10,000, things like that. But these numbers are as close as they can get until they actually form a new bargaining unit and start hiring people and to see if they even get responses at the salary range that they set, right? So these numbers are basically pretty close. We just have some real minor cleanup and questions for Klaus that Nicole couldn't answer. And that could be, I think realistically, in terms of a staff to staff discussion, could be resolved in a matter of, a month or so. And
it would be less than that. I'm here. I've been staring at these numbers for a month or so. And I do, yes, I do recognize I'm noticing some things. There is some cleanup to be done.
But it's de minimis in terms of the overall $5,600,000 number, quite frankly.
Agreed. The total dollars are close.
So I think from a staff perspective, it can go fast. From a political perspective, it's how often the respective boards meet in timing of Alpine Board of Soups versus Board of Directors. So from, I think,
as Chief Ansel said, there's a legal component to this that we all won't hope for the best, but there's always a legal component.
Yeah.
Thank you. I see that we have a hand up from the community, Eric.
Kathleen, if you want to unmute, you can speak.
Hi, thank you so much. And thank you for this presentation. I was just wondering if any of these options might consider EMS or advanced life support, or if that would be something we'd have to consider separate from this proposal.
Chief, do you want to talk about what you're envisioning for the paid staff that would come on any of these three options?
So as far as EMS proportion of it is, we would have basically what you have right now with Lake Valley coming as an ALS service, and with the fire department is providing what BLS we could if you stay in the volunteer model. If you go to the paid staff, we could always caveat something in there to have an ALS portion of it, a paramedics side of it, but without a box, an ambulance, that really kind of.
And then of the options that are the 3 battalion chiefs, 3 captains, or captain and the battalion chief, 3 captains and battalion chief, what would their level of training would you say on the medical side be?
We could stipulate that they are a basic EMT.
Okay.
And that would provide that basic coverage. So, and I think there's also some talks of trying to get the Kirkwood Clinic to do something at some point too. So there's that other option, and it had nothing to do with me, so I can't really comment on it. But there would be that other option too that we could facilitate.
Yeah.
But as of right now, as far as the fire department could be concerned with, will be a BLS service with EMTs. Does that answer your question?
Basically, it would be the same ambulatory service we get right now.
Correct.
Nothing would change because Eastern Alpine doesn't provide ambulatory service.
Correct.
You would still have Lake Valley as a provider.
But the difference, I guess, the thing I want to highlight right now is in our current, just so everyone here in Kirkwood knows, currently there's either no one who is going to be on shift to respond quickly. There will be people who will be on shift who are at very different levels of training, and not certainly most of the majority are not EMTs. And so this model of one of these three options would be that there would be someone 24/7, 365 who is at least one person who is EMT.
If you don't go with the volunteer side.
Correct. The full volunteer. I mean, you might have volunteers supplementing that one full-time person.
Right.
Who will have different levels of training.
And
whatnot.
we have volunteers.
Yeah, we're hoping for that. But my point being that like any of these three options would be 24/7, 365, at least one EMT in Kirkwood that could respond.
We could stipulate that when we go to the hiring process. Absolutely.
Do you use BLS and EMT interchangeably?
I'm sorry, what?
BLS and EMT are those?
BLS is the basic life support. That's an EMT level. Advanced life support would be your advanced
Right.
EMT.
No, I understand. But so okay, so when you say all will be EMT certified, they will all be BLS. I'm just not so good on the terminology.
No, I understand. So if we go with that, the battalion chief captain level, we could stipulate that they are at a minimum an EMT level. That would be a basic life support.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. I think I get it.
No ambulance, no, just
I
they're
understand.
qualified to, yeah.
But it would give you this stepping stone. If you had two EMTs, potentially down the road, more money was found, you could, like we had before, with two EMTs, you could recreate the BLS ambulance here in Kirkwood through Mountain County's EMS. So there is protocols, procedures, and policies that allows us to do that if we have the personnel.
Correct.
But again, this isn't what we're talking about today. We're just talking about fire coverage and trying to keep coverage 24/7.
Some kind of basic response for the citizens here from Kirkwood.
Thank you, Chief. All right, so I would say is, so what I would propose and would accept a motion on would be something of the form of John and I would go forward with staff to make sure that we're working with our partners in Alpine County to move as quickly as possible. It sounds like under a month, maybe we'll give it 2 months, in the next 2 months to be able to come back with some firmed up numbers with one of the three options on the screen now. And we would not go forward with considering anything that is more of a replication of our current level of service. Is that the consensus that I heard of the board?
Yes.
Yes, I just want to add that to me, it isn't the numbers, it's how's it going to work? At least an operating model of who does what. You know, because that's like for an Amador, they made it clear, we'll bill you for who actual hours served. So if somebody misses a shift, you know, that's on you. It's not on us. So it's a contract service, and so these are the responsibilities of each party. I would at least like to see what that looks like.
I think that'll be in the contract that Klaus was alluding to
Yeah,
in
okay.
the proposal. That's the legal side of the whole thing.
All right.
Well, we need a statement of work on both sides, right?
Yeah.
If we're providing
Right.
apparatus and then who's
Exactly,
maintaining
who
the
maintains
apparatus,
it, and that was one of the
Firehouse,
fuel
the utilities.
fuel costs,
Yep.
yeah, blah, blah, blah.
stipends.
So-
Yeah, can we still get into the building? Yeah, little thing.
There's also an issue.
Maybe not you, Bob, now that you raised another question.
Yeah, right. And Terry, can you give us a sense of how the supervisors feel about all of this?
We haven't discussed it.
Well, that's,
Yeah,
yeah, well, how would you present it?
no, so we haven't discussed it as a board. It hasn't been put on the agenda. So as we move ahead here,
Uh-huh.
yes, we can put it on the agenda because it has to get approved by the board of supervisors.
Right.
How would you present?
I've talked to one other supervisor about it. That's all I can do. you
Uh-huh.
know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We know the feeling.
Yeah.
That works.
So productive.
Okay.
Okay,
There's the other side of it. If we're funding it with 218, there'd have to be some statement about the local resources being funded through 218, so the funds aren't diverted, things like that. So there's a lot of detail to the statement of work.
I mean, fortunately, we could, quite frankly, probably get a copy of the MOU that AFPD is using with the city of Plymouth or with Longford Fire Department.
Oh.
And it's probably a really good basis that would save
Yeah.
a lot of lawyer time. I know district council and county council like to spend our money, but we can
Yeah.
at least have a good framework to start with that is already
Right.
being used.
It's a good
low
use of
cost.
plagiarism.
It's good use of plagiarism,
Better
absolutely.
music.
okay, all right,
Better than
okay.
AI
So
anyway.
can I get do we need a motion for that, or do you think that's a vote?
I think that's probably should be a motion, especially since we're specifically excluding that one
Sure.
based on at least 3. I didn't hear which way you wanted to go, but it was a majority.
Majority already?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I move-
Does anyone want to state a motion?
I move that you proceed as you described. In other words, you and John Schroeder work with staff to expedite a proposal with as much statement of work as we can for review at next meeting if
For
possible.
one of these three options? Or
Yeah,
one
I would
option?
say there's always a
Yeah.
professional on site.
Okay. Is there a second of that motion?
Second.
All in favor, indicate with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No opposed. All right, well, I'll thank our partners here in Alpine County another time, and look forward to working with you on this and going forward. And we'll be in touch about scheduling our next conversation. Talk to you about that soon. All right. Thank you. Move on to agenda item 9C. I think we're on finances.
Yeah, not to disappoint, but this is a sleepy finance month.
I like sleepy finance.
Next up is the operating budget, the capital budget, and the propane rate study. So if we look like we're not earning our keep, we will be soon.
Finally.
All right. So we're looking at the overview and budget variances. This actually is for February, but I do know, I think we have January to cover.
But this
But
overview
right.
incorporates everything from January, so there's no reason to include the old budget or variances.
Any questions on the overview and budget variances?
No.
No? Okay.
The reason it was boring is because everything was basically a target budget for the month. So
Yeah, it's
unless outlined here, which is an old notice.
shortest finance committee meeting we've had.
It's true, 7 minutes.
I didn't even have questions beforehand, so.
So before we move off of this, there any question on the variances? Oh, Klaus, hold on, Klaus. All your fellow Alpine County people left, Klaus. Sorry about that. You can unmute though.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Just, I don't want to add to the length of the meeting at all, but just a question on page 102 of the packet. I think I just want to make sure I understand one thing. And I believe, just for clarification, as we speak about my numbers, I can ask about your numbers when we have those conversations. Is that fair, Eric? Or?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Let me get there. Give me a moment. Okay. 102. Okay.
This is the actual volunteer fire department. I just wanted to confirm that.
That is correct.
Okay. And if I have questions about these line items, we'll be in discussion, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
The only thing I would mention to you, Klaus, as you do look through this packet, there is another item that goes in the finance packets. We only once a year do we bring it back to the board, but we have a 501c3 that funds a lot of capital costs for the fire department. And you won't see that here because it's a separate 501c3 corporation with a different board. But if our finance packets, I will send you the latest finance packet, which will have that information in there for you as well.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Of course. Okay.
All right.
Were there any questions on the budget variances or any of the specific
No.
income statements for either month from anyone?
All good.
All looked normal.
Okay.
All right.
Probably just
Moving down.
do cash flow probably.
Yeah, do cash flow if you would.
Any questions?
I'm getting there. Give me a second. There we go. I'm scrolling as fast as I can.
All right. Cash flow. Are there any questions on the cash flow spreadsheet?
Believe it or not, it's hard to read at that distance. What page is
Page
it?
113.
We're better than budget, which is
Better.
nice. Better than predicted in terms of our cash flow, so that's been good. So, yep. Okay,
Okay. Okay.
all right. And I guess Brandy's up.
All right, that was easy.
It was good.
Thank you, Terry.
We'll try harder next month.
We'll have more.
We'll have a lot next month.
We'll have more attack surface next month.
Yeah.
All right, is it me?
Yep, we're on 90 now, please. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So in this packet, we have performance reporting for February and March, and I am just going to hit the highlights here. Starting with electric generation, you'll see some powerhouse production in February. That was a result of the ground fault. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm past my part, so I'm just listening. Oh, did you?
Hold on, Klaus. You're still unmuted, Klaus. Let us help you with that. There we go. Sorry about that.
Oh no, that's fine. So the 2180 you see in February from Powerhouse production was when we were running the Powerhouse troubleshooting the ground fault. Other than that, for electric, we're running pretty normal. You'll see 7% unidentified losses for both February and March, with a 10% year to date.
Brandy, for March, I assume that's a typo, that total production is less than KISO purchase.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bob. Yes, that is a typo. It's normally a formula, so I'll double check that. Thank you.
Okay.
If we move down to propane, we see negative numbers in losses for both February and March. This isn't unusual as you look back through the year. You'll see some high positives also. We're sitting at 2% loss year to date, and normally we see that in the 0 to 5% range, with the goal being 2%. So also looking pretty normal for propane. Moving over to water production. On this one, there's a line in March, the discovered leaks before meters, and you'll see 200,000 gallons. So this was a result of the water main break. This is an estimate of the 200,000 gallons that was based on our tank levels before and after the event. Even with that, we're seeing 15% year-to-date losses. So relatively normal for this time of year, but that was a pretty big hit in March. And then lastly, for wastewater, again, we're seeing pretty normal usage for this time of year. I'll note that in March, our unidentified, unmetered usage, which is the inflow and infiltration coming into the collection system, is starting to creep up. We're seeing a 30%. So this is the beginning of spring melt and extra water getting into our system. We expect to see that continue probably through the end of this fiscal year. We're sitting at 17% I&I for the year. And I don't have anything else of note, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
On the aquifer levels for well 4 and 5, we seem to be establishing a new low. Is that still well within our needs?
It is. So this is something we had looked at relatively recently, looking back at the historical usage, not only of this aquifer, but of the other aquifers that we have some data on. And this is low, but it is not, it is not unheard of. It is not a level that is of current concern. It's just, we're using this well potentially more than we have in the past few years. It's something we're keeping a close eye on, though.
Okay, thanks.
I have a number in my head, and Bob, this is maybe more of a question for you, but I think it was something like 6.3 million kilowatt hours that we need to sell before to cover all of the fixed portions of our variable rate. Is that number about right?
I think so. I'd have to double check, but yes.
Okay. Well, I'm just because we crossed over that this month is what I would infer, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Well, I guess actual metered is only 5.8, so we're still a little bit away. But I just want to make that. Am I remembering that number correctly? Is that or that concept correctly?
I refer you to the rate study.
Yeah, right. It's just I don't know what's changed since we made other changes since then.
Okay.
It's been 4 other.
Well, more importantly, we still have 3 months to get there. If we haven't, whatever number it is, if that number is more like 6 or something, we have cover all of our fixed costs.
I don't know, and I won't want to speak out of turn, but by guessing.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay. I think that would be all for agenda item 90 then. Let's go on to, thank you, Brandy. Appreciate your help on all this. Let's go on to agenda item number 10, major project updates.
So this, now that we have the water master plan, which will be going to ops EOP this month, and we have the propane master plan and the electric master plan. I've updated this to reflect those projects and that timing, so that these are current. Wastewater is still a gas at this point until we do the smoke testing and cammering this summer. we're about to hire one person for that already, so that's good, possibly two. So that project is all underway. With the snow melting, we're gonna be able to get into it early, so we're getting an early start on that. But the wastewater are just our best guess right now in terms of projects. So happy to entertain any questions.
Okay, no questions. General Manager's report, 11.
The propane study is ready for the Finance Committee this month. The first round of the budget and first round of the capital plan are both going to be ready for finance this month as well. Finance will be meeting a week early to accommodate schedules. And so the board may start seeing those in June, definitely by July board meeting. And then the water wastewater rate study, I've been working with a consultant and he's about 50% through building that right now.
Can you just let us know where we are in terms of open positions being filled in the org chart in general?
We have 4 open positions right now. Is that right? 2 in admin, no, 2 in admin. No, we filled one in water wastewater, so we have 1, so we have 3 open.
One wastewater, and then the 2 seasonal.
And then seasonals, which I don't really count, but but we filled one of the seasonals as well. But in terms of full-time staff, we are advertising. We have interviews next week for the 2 admin positions. And we still have 1 opening, although I just received a text that someone may be interested in applying for the remaining water wastewater opening.
Okay. And the seasonal snow removal, are they still?
No, they're
gone.
No, we finished that mid-April, Rick.
They took the snow stakes down off the road.
No, we'll be doing that. They took as much down as they could, but we'll continue to take them down.
Okay.
Some have come down. No,
Yeah, most are down around my house, yeah, but not the driveways. So that's still going on.
That's still going on.
A 10-foot blizzard might be slow to react.
I mean, quite frankly, when we still had them, they were buried. So we couldn't get them out when we still had the staff, and based on where we were in budget, we decided to cut the staff loose.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for General Manager's report?
No.
Great. Operations report, agenda item 12.
Just a little more with staff, and I just want to, as you know, Derek Dornbrook, our chief plant operators, took a job with the Kingsbury Grade Improvement District, I believe. But just want to thank Derek, and he's been with the district for I think 23 years now, and been working with him for almost 20 myself. And so just want to say thank you, Derek, for all his work and his service to the district and the community. Briefly for fire department, we're up to 62 calls this year to date. So we're actually above from the last couple of years where we've been. And we're working closer to getting the Title 22 first aid course, which is typically required or is required by the state for all volunteer fire departments for first aid. I found an instructor willing to take the course, and then she's gone to Mountain County ZMS Authority, who authorizes the instruction. And believe it or not, there was no policy for Title 22 class to be taught anywhere in Alpine, Calaveras, or Amador County. So they've created this policy, and we hope to get this class moving forward in the next month for our volunteers, for the ones that don't have EMTs and higher level of EMS care certification, but also it's going to be a good platform for the counties as well. And this is something that we've all discovered just going through the process of the 218 and trying to build a bigger and better fire department for our community. As I mentioned previously, we are still missing shifts on the on-call system. And, being May, things are going to change. People are going to leave the valley who will no longer work for the resort. And so I expect that we'll see some more missed shifts in the future, but we'll do our best to fill them. And I'm very grateful to the volunteers for, signing up to be on call, especially on the weekends. CAL FIRE just released the residential burn permit, which is required The residential burn permit information, which is required for open burning, residential burning. I think we're going to try to put a little blurb in the next newsletter article, but there's information here at the district if anybody has questions on how to get a CAL FIRE burn permit. You can do it online now, which is really nice, and put the rules and regulations around residential burning. So just so you know, and I think that is it for fire, unless there's any questions.
Festival? Under fire or no?
No,
Okay, great. I wanna make
not
sure.
yet.
Okay, I just want to make
It's on
sure.
my list.
Jason,
Well, one report that came out this week, I'm trying to remember the name. It's the Tahoe Downer Association. So they have a fairly large amount of forest managed along with everyone else. They were able to put together a customized insurance package for all of the homeowners based that includes the benefit of the forest treatment that was done in the area. So I was fascinated by that. It was a lot of it was put together by Dave Jones, our former insurance commissioner, who's now at UC Berkeley. So that's a different situation than what we have here, but it just made me wonder, is there some way to create some sort of structure where the insurance benefit, there's an insurance benefit to how how everything is managed. So it may be a long shot, but I was just really intrigued by it. So I'll send you a copy. Have you see what you think?
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of that.
Okay.
Be great. Thanks. Summer Festival, which is actually, I'll move down to my 501(c)(3) agenda here.
I'll have to skip ahead.
Yeah, a little bit. So we are scheduled to have the event this year, July 5th. It's really a 501(c)(3) activity, as you know. And so working with Jennifer, with KCA and Helen, and of course myself and Terry, we're already started the process. The special event permit, I've signed it. It's been pushed to Vail Resorts for their signature for the ABC permit, and then it'll go to the sheriff for his signature so we can get a permit, serve alcohol for the event. And more importantly, we put the grant in for Epic Promise for Vail to help support the event, and we received a grant, and we're very thankful for their support this year. And so you'll probably hear more and see more in the upcoming months, especially with our newsletter. But according to Helen, we've already sold tickets for the event this year. It'll be at the Plaza again, July 5th between 4 and 7 p.m. and looking for another event that's going to completely support the fire department. And there's definitely some needs for new equipment. Especially on the communication side, I was telling Peter, who's on the 501(c)(3) board, and I haven't told you, Doug, yet, but the state's got a new radio pack or new radio frequencies for all the, so they call it the state load, but basically there's a new operating plan for radios. And so I have to have all my radios reprogrammed. And plus I want to buy another radio through the 501(c)(3). And I'll send an email out to that board for the request. The bottom line is, I think for the Summer Festival fundraising, we're going to look at communications and PPE as a priority for this year's event. And that's pretty much it for Summer Festival, unless you.
I just want to say, echo and say thank you to our friends at Kirkwood and Mountain Resort for their support on the Epic Promise. I mean, that really was what makes this happen from a financial side and staffing time, and they put volunteers out there. And so really a lot of gratitude to them for continuing to support this year after year. Also a lot of gratitude to our volunteers who are spending their time, Jen and yourself, Terry, and others who are working on this, and Helen, who I think stepped in last year for the first time and took on a lot of the planning with Jen.
Yeah.
To that end, I imagine you wouldn't mind having other volunteers supporting to get things moving, to make sure, because I know last year was kind of a big transition for us, right? There was a lot of new stuff, new people getting involved, KCA really stepping in, which was, again, a lot of gratitude to them for stepping in. If someone were to listen to this now or listening live, who would they contact if they wanted to volunteer to help organize and even operate Summer Festival?
Our point person for the event is again Jen.
Okay.
But myself or
Sure.
any of the volunteer firefighters, we're happy to put you on our list and try to plug you into the system. They're going to be using Give Butter for the software again this year for pre-registration online. And I believe if you signed up for the event last year, you'll be in the system. You won't have to put in all the data. what you did last year, so.
And
But
remember,
again, volunteers can contact me, we're happy
Great.
with their help.
and I'm sure if it went to info@kmpud.com, we could get it to the right place as well.
Right.
I think the Give Butter, that the system worked last year. I remember having my phone helping people register last year. So I thought that was a faster and more improved system too. So I think we made a lot of good changes last year. So thank you for everyone who's working hard on that.
And we keep the board on the day before the board meeting,
Yeah,
July 4th.
yes. Staff doesn't get that day off.
No, that's a busy weekend. Switching over to normal, as John mentioned, snow stakes, there are several that are still up. We had a good tech when they were melting out, but we'll certainly be going back and grabbing all those things. We're looking at our equipment, see how we ended up for the year. We've already got a capital request from the department head to Eric to think about. And we're basically just, again, wrapping up the season. And as we've always said, snow removal contracts next year will go out in August. And so I've already gotten calls from HOAs. I understand that your budgets, are usually done by June, July, but really we won't know all the numbers and give you a good solid contract price until August. So, but you welcome.
Is there any reason that is there any reason that the HOAs couldn't assume something similar?
Yes. There is definitely a reason HOA should not assume anything.
Yeah.
As I say every year. Just wait. Hey, before I got here, these used budget numbers came out in November. So August, we're doing good by 2 months. So I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah. And then the last couple things, or last thing, as you may recall, in Friday, March 28th, we had a water main leak or water main break over on the north side of Loop Road. It was a 4-inch concrete pipe essentially that just broke. So we actually was reported by one of our district staff, and we want to say thank you to Vail Resorts for the assistance with that. They had some staff out there helping us divert water and mitigate the leak. But again, we were able to basically get the water on, isolate the leak, get the water on for the rest of the valley, and make a repair to the road. So it was in place for the weekend within 24 hours, actually less than that. It was like 12 and a half hours to get the road back in place. So we'll be doing some exploratory digging next week. We have notified Adam and Greg and the resort to let their residents know they might be impacted over at Pine Lodge and Renwick employee housing while we go in there to make the repair. But next week we'll get in, take a look at this weird concrete valve cluster issue that was near the break, figure out what we have, and then once we have a good plan of attack for the repair, we'll certainly post notices on how long water will be turned off. At no time did we think or lose compliance with the quality of the water during this emergency. And I think that was pretty much it, unless you have anything to add about the break, Eric.
Rick, can I just ask at a high level for all of us, like we had the power outage in February, I guess it was, and then this water main break. Would you say that this has to do with just the need for us to, are these good reminders of our aging infrastructure and that we need to be replacing things, and that's what capital improvements will help prevent in the future?
You've said it very well. I can't add any more to that.
Great. I just wanted to say that out loud.
What kind of pipe are you going to put in there to replace the
C900? That's all we use is C900.
The green C9, it's a green.
No, green sewer. That's SDR 35. We're going to use actually C905 now. The standard changed.
Okay.
And is it white? Is there going to be any problem with?
It can be white though, Chris. Sometimes it's a rare run when they make it white. But
It's fun to know.
Blue for water, green for wastewater.
Purple for recycle.
Purple for partly recycled. Good enough for golf. Have you checked to see on availability of the pipe?
No idea. I'm gonna let that default to the project manager for the repair.
Okay.
But I can keep you in the loop at operations committee if it comes up to.
Just because with all the tariffs.
There's no shortage of C905
Okay.
or valves, which we will also need,
All right.
or fittings. No, there's no shortage. There a long time. Yeah. Basically a long time ago, the US basically banned Chinese steel, which is
Right.
so there's that supply chain issue with tariffs in China. It really never affects water because of that and wastewater. It's still basically lingering on, and their substandard products were never allowed. So we'll be fine. I mean, C905 and valves are on the shelves,
Okay.
especially on a 4-inch. If we were talking about an 18-inch, that might give you a different answer.
It was a 4-inch line?
4-inch.
Okay.
But if it was an 18, it's the different answer. But 4-inch is so common. I mean, we could probably borrow it from Amador Water if we needed. So,
Okay.
Right. Anything else for your operations report?
Lose my report.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to standing committee reports. Let's start with finance. John.
Nothing more to report. The next finance meeting has the big items, operating budget, cap budget, and propane rate study. So there'll be a lot
Coming up. Thank you. All right, engineering operations planning, Peter.
We didn't meet.
Okay. Do you want to mention anything about hydrants and stuff that you mentioned before?
Well, I noticed that the snow removal did dig out a number of hydrants in KMA. And also I'd like to express gratitude to some of the homeowners who actually dug out some hydrants too. And there's still a few that are buried. Are we going to dig any of those out, or are we going to just wait till it melts out?
solar plow.
Solar plow, yeah, we're gonna wait.
Okay. Because there are some that are buried pretty deeply. It's
Okay.
one thing I've learned through this experiment was that it takes a lot longer to dig out the ones on the up slope from the road than the ones from down slope, because you have to throw the snow out into the street.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
So, did you keep track of the hours that that were spent on by snow removal, digging out the hydrants? Just so we can budget for next year. We have some idea about what it
If
takes.
snow removal performed any water activities, i.e. digging out hydrants or whatever activities, we would be able to have those numbers, but I can't tell you what they are right now.
Okay, I was just curious because this is a problem that we're probably going to have to deal with for a while going forward. I mean,
Understood. And again, we've gone back to the district's engineer for design standards to get a new design standard to reflect the new signage and so forth, to come back through operations to discuss this further.
okay, we'll deal with it at the committee level.
Yep, and we will look forward to more of a conversation about that at the board level once COP has reviewed and give recommendations. Yes.
Right.
Okay. Communications. I will say that we're working on a couple of topics right now. You can see the report in the packet. We have the website onboarding materials that we were talking through, and then the KVFD and comms around that. So we'll have potentially more on that coming up soon. I will point out that depending on how some of these conversations go, we will have reached our initial plan of what we have to do. And there's some stuff in our backlog, nothing critical for today, but if you have something that you are urgently thinking that communications should be working on, think about it soon, and we can come up with that at the next board meeting if that's necessary. So that's it for communications. I'll move to personnel. So there's a report in there. I want to just thank John for his partnership on this project. Both of us spent time calling and emailing, and John did a lot of great work on you drafted that document. So a lot of gratitude to him in partnership on this project to retain an appraiser, which we have signed the contract with the appraiser. And so hope that we'll have some more information for you all very soon to go on potential.
Yeah, when we put in our report, we try to be pretty very complete with like what the process was. We want to make sure it's all seen as a very fair transaction to Eric and to the district. So we put in there the process we went through to get the appraiser, who we chose. The appraisal is the contract signed and the appraisal is scheduled. Put in some expectations with regards to financing, spoke to some of the bankers, including our corporate banker, tried to outline the cost impact as far as, there is a savings of avoiding a 6% realty fee. But there's a discussion about that and how we envision those costs, the related transactions costs to be covered. Eric's looked at all this. We all seem to be in agreement on it, but since it is a kind of an in-house transaction, we wanted to really put a lot of the detail in there, the process we went through and the decisions being made. So take a look at it if you haven't already.
Yeah. Yes. And again, thank you, John, for drafting that first draft of that. I think it's really helpful for us to have this documented. And as you said, making sure that this is clear as the steps that we're taking. It was an interesting journey for me, making phone calls and having people not.
Well, it's typical Kirkwood. You can't get anybody to do work in Kirkwood. That's the thing.
It was a lot more phone calls than I'd imagined we'd be making.
It's
But
like
it was
last year,
a journey.
I think I put 14 requests out to a plumber and ended up going to Ferguson Hardware and getting a wrench myself. It's hard to get help out here.
Okay. Anything else, John, you wanted to add? Or we?
Nope. That's it.
Thank you, John. All right. IT and cybersecurity, Bob.
Didn't meet.
Okay. And LAFCO also did not meet. All right. I think that's it for 13, 14. We do not have any temporary advisory committees. 15, general board discussion. Okay. I don't hear any discussion. So 16, adjournment. So our next meeting is Friday, June 6th. I want to just take a quick poll right now. I know I will most likely have to be remote June 6th. So before we have to have a quorum here, of course. Is everyone else up? We're planning to be here in person on June 6th. So it was Friday. It's Friday, June 6th.
I'll be here in person.
I think I'll be here.
I can't commit yet. Sorry,
Okay.
I don't know.
So then we'll have to figure that out.
Checking.
Okay.
Yeah, I should be.
Okay.
I should be here.
I will make note to follow up to just confirm all of this since it seems like we might be okay, but I want to make sure. And I apologize for that, but that's it. So I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you everyone for joining today. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah.